So a little smattering of some of the measures, but it's important to measure three things: the phone, the travel, and the technology. So I'm going to turn it over to Claudia for a wrap-up.
And we'll just thank you all. A lot of you have really hung in through this webinar. We really appreciate the fact that, well, I hope it means you're finding it of value, giving you really great food for thought. So this is back to our agenda. Just a quick reminder of what we went through today, which was our top 3 reasons, which are assuming that they will just know how to do it. And that leads them to failure, unfortunately. Compromising the model, not having it clearly defined, and having not only the hybrid but the whole organization understand what the model is and sticking with it. Murky measures, I love that phrase, but that's key. Requirements, we talked about the territory management, how absolutely essential that is. Consultative selling, stand-up presentation if that's part of your model, web-based interactions and presentations if that's part of your model. And really balancing web, phone, face-to-face, having the tools you need, of which there are many coming out now, and from us actually, and hybrid creep, and then the measurement. So that is the end of our presentation. We really hope that you have found some things that will be of use to you that you can take away and apply on your job. The questions are now coming in, and so I would love to take a few of those. A lot of people have questions about web meetings and the equipment you need and things like that.
Come look at ours.
No, well, it's actually an interesting process. We're getting a lot of help on it. There's a lot out there. But I will tell you that it's been a quantum leap forward in terms of how easy it is to get the technology. A lot of it is now much simpler. You do need to obviously have a computer. If you want to show your face, you need to have a camera. But it's much, much simpler than the good old days than we used to have. There were some questions about if we have 25% of, if you let them go out in the field for 25%, how do you cover the phones while they're out? Well, the answer to that is quite straightforward, which is in exactly the same way as you would cover the phones if they were out for some other reason, which is you would cover them with, with people filling in. Also, as with a wholesaler, with anything, they call in from the field. So that definitely is the way. A couple of you asked if you could have the tool. I think the answer to that is absolutely yes. You could have the tool if you'd like to. That would be great. We'll try to send that out. This probably won't happen until next week. But definitely be very interested in sharing that with you and hearing how that works for you. Wow, so many questions coming in. So many questions coming in. Let me give you 2 or 3 more. Here's one more question that's on the comp side. Let's look at the comp side. How much base and how much production AUM based? What ratios? These are very complex questions, and I can tell you what we see is that actually there are some hybrid wholesalers who are expected to bring in the same kind of production as a full wholesaler. So that's very interesting. In terms of comp, what we're seeing is that, again, I don't want to go into details of this, but you're looking at probably $120,000 a year person, depending on the geography. Would you agree with that, Marianne?
Yep.
Here I have one. What's the profile of a typical FA comfortable working this way? Great question. And we also had a couple questions about channels. Which channel would it make sense to do this in? And we're going to take a radical stance, I think, on this one and say we've seen comfort in every channel and with many different kinds of FAs.
And really, I think what drives this is how well the hybrid can, in quotes, sell the benefits of this position, because this is really about being in touch with an advisor, even on a different basis. But a lot of these advisors out there are also pretty tech savvy, and they love the go-to meetings, and they actually prefer that in some cases than having a face-to-face meeting, which tends to take a little bit longer. So it's, you know, there's not a specific, I think, category of FAs, but I also think that people need to be very cognizant of the fact that there are some advisors out there who are not going to buy into this model.
Right.
And they are going to say, you know what, I want to see a wholesaler. And assuming that they have the production
Right.
and the, you know, the size of the advisor's opportunity is there, let's get them a wholesaler.
Yeah. I have a great question, Marianne, here that I want Marianne to pick up because it's really her bailiwick. And here's the question. Often the answer I get from an FA in regards to setting a meeting is call me when you're in town. You want to talk a little bit about hybrid? It's a great question, and it's true. Talk a little bit about hybrid positioning because that's huge.
Yeah, I think that, and again, they're going on what they've known. And so I think that it really happens up front in the introduction, or even if they do know the advisor, to say, you know, let me give you a sense about what we think is going to give you the most benefit in terms of how these meetings work. And again, it's selling the process of not a rotation. I don't do necessarily come every 6 weeks. When I do come, I have a very substantial meeting, and it's a business review. And that doesn't mean I can never come under any other circumstances, but quite frankly, that we've found with many advisors that they really appreciate the efficiency of doing a lot of the work over the phone, over the web. And again, if the advisor is really resistant, but a lot really relies on how comfortable the hybrid wholesaler is in selling their position. If they start to apologize for it, if they start to say things like, well, everybody's cutting back, and everybody's cutting back, so we shouldn't, you know, so we won't get out to see you as often, that's a very, very big deal in terms of kind of not getting where you want to be. So
I have another great question here. It's actually, I think, a follow-up on that. How do you cover the phones? Being out for 2 weeks vacation is different from being out 25% of the time. With staffing levels already running slim, having another person cover is not the most effective option at times. Great question here. Have you ever seen a traditional internal that covers 2 or 3 hybrids? And the answer to that is absolutely yes.
Yep.
Again, when you think about your productivity, on this. If they're out in the field, you want them to be on the phone when they come back. So having someone back them up while they're in the field so that they don't come back with more admin work than they can do. So they don't spend a week in the field and then a week doing admin.
And I know some hybrids that are out there that actually, it was funny because they're trying to be very creative in what they were trying to sell to their management team. It says, if I do a certain level of production, can I get to have an internal?
And we're very big on it. I mean, if you really want them to sell. You know, here's a great question, very small, and we're only going to do a couple more. I think it's going to be a time for everyone to get back, hopefully to lunch for some of us and to work for many. Do you have a good ratio for travel versus activity? For example, travel 10% of the time equals 15 phone activity. I have to say I've never thought of it that way. And it's really about a balance. You know, so what you're trying to do is honestly look at the individual advisor and do what we talked about very, very briefly, this touch point strategy. To manage this particular relationship, I need to touch this advisor this many times. Sometimes it will be face-to-face, sometimes it will be phone, sometimes it will be email.
I think it's very much a learning curve, too, because what you want to look at is you have to define your A's, B's, and C's very differently, and you have to also, you know, one of the things that we've seen up front, which is important to pay attention to, we think, is that when you have a new hybrid, you can't expect them to, in the first month, really go out in the field.
I think that's an important point, yeah.
They need to get their arms around who these guys are that are on the list, how much information they have about them, and really get their territory set up in terms of A's, B's, and C's that make sense. And then they can begin to look at how many times should I see the A's, B's, and